Welcome to An Author's Journey, where a prominent author chats with us about their journey as a writer. I'm your host, Joe Pizzo. Our guest today is Michelle Vinokurov, a young adult who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. She was nonverbal until age 6. At 22 years old, her life story was released in a published book called This is Autism. Today, Michelle has worked as a paraprofessional for elementary school students. She recently was in Middletown Township Public School District in New Jersey, and she's moved down to Florida, where she's also working as a paraprofessional. She was recently awarded as Best Support Staff of the School Year for the year 2020-2021. She has been a valuable member of the New Jersey Autism Think Tank. She's presently earning her bachelor's degree in the science of psychology, applied behavior analysis through Purdue University Global. In the fall of 2022, she will graduate and earn her bachelor's degree. Michelle, welcome to An Author's Journey.
Thank you so much for having me on here today.
It's an absolute pleasure, and I know that the audience is going to learn a lot from you. So I'm going to jump right into the questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I love your enthusiasm. Now, first question. When did you first become interested in writing, and what types of writing did you do as a youngster?
So when it comes to writing, I actually first started writing at home, as a matter of fact, because I would just carry a notebook with me and I would just write about whatever be like from my day and stuff. Even my parents remember this, where I would just have a notebook with me, like wherever be to museums where I would just learn something and I would jot it down, or just writing like journals about my day. So I always had a notebook with me because it just got me to just think about with myself and just to just explore and get creative.
Would you take those notes then and make them into stories or reports, or was it just the practice of staying focused, taking the notes?
It's a mix of both. It was practice of note taking because during my school years, I did struggle with that a bit. But yeah, it was just practice note taking. I would turn into like my own like little report about like what I learned and stuff at museums, and like whether it be from artifacts to even just general facts about like a time period in history. My family and I would go to like we used to go to museums a lot, like especially like the Museum of Natural History in New York. We used to go there and stuff. I would just jot down what I've learned and everything. So yeah, it's a mix of both.
Well, that's a wonderful technique that you had, and it's a great way to learn, because on field trips, you'll see many times teachers will have their students take notes so they stay engaged in the learning, and there's a purpose to it. So you were way ahead of your time, actually. That's a good thing to hear. As a teacher, I'm very impressed.
Thanks.
And you,
That was just something I really was into. I always like enjoyed learning in general. So I that was my hobby.
okay, be sure to thank your mom and dad also, because they didn't discourage you from that. I'm sure they encouraged you, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So when did you first know about your autism, and I mean, how did that knowledge come about to you?
So I actually first learned that I was autistic in middle school. I was in sixth grade, and it was this one day we were at my family friend's house. We were watching a documentary about Dr. Temple Grandin, and that's where my parents were like trying to, they were in a way like indirectly telling me about how you're very similar to how she thinks and stuff, like to watch like how she behaves and stuff and how her thinking process is, because I pretty much was very similar when it came to the way that she thinks and how she behaves and stuff, and when it comes to navigating in the world and everything. So that's kind of where my parents pretty much explained to me that, like, after we watched the entire documentary, that's where they kind of explained to me that that you're still just like everyone else, but you just think differently. That's all it is. And that's how I pretty much learned that, yeah, I started to become more aware about with, especially in school. Like, I started noticing a lot that I do think differently than my classmates and everything. So that's pretty much how I learned about being autistic. And my parents went to every child study team meeting and for my IEP meetings and everything. And so my teachers, like, really were very accommodating to me. Like, they would provide all my accommodations and modifications when needed. So they really helped me out so much.
And you mentioned it's just a matter of a difference in thinking when you're autistic, and I think that that says as much about you and your parents and the folks who are teaching you as anything, because it's a mindset. And recognizing that, yes, there's a difference in the thought process seems to be absolutely crucial. And you are the poster child for someone who was treated the right way and ended up flourishing because of that. So there are a lot of folks to be grateful for, and I'm sure you are, given that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many people I think about, all my teachers growing up, my family, my friends and stuff. Everybody just like helped me out so much to grow into who I am today. I'm very thankful about that.
I see why you're such an easy person to chat with, and why you're an inspiration to a lot of folks who know you or fortunate enough to know you. Let me ask you the next question. When you were given a task to do a writing assignment in class, did your teachers look at you and say, okay, Michelle has autism, we have to give her different requirements? Or did they say, you know what, her thinking's a little bit different. She thinks maybe in a different manner, but she can handle this.
So that's a really good question. I in the beginning, like, especially when I would say when I was in third grade, when I was finally in the public school district, coming from my private school that I was at, struggled a lot with writing. Like, I barely even was even to hold a pencil. They had to really accommodate me a lot in terms of, like, instead of physically like handwriting, I would like use a keyboard to type what my thoughts were and stuff. And they needed to give me a lot of time because it took me so much longer to process, um, and like just to think about what I'm gonna write about with this topic. So, and over the years, especially by the time I was in eighth grade, I was pushed into a general ed classroom for language arts in the middle of the school year, because especially from the child study team, they really felt like I was ready to be in a general ed setting. So at that point, I was pretty much doing the same assignments as everybody else. Yes, I got some support where, let's say, with using a visual, such as a graphic organizer to organize my thoughts. Just for any writing teachers as a tip, like, any visuals like that really do help with organizing thoughts when it comes to processing like the information about a topic that people are going to write about. So I know that helped me a lot. And even eventually nowadays with college, for me, I just like free write. Like, I first started like free writing, and then I'll just like go through the process of like revising and everything. Yeah.
Before we began, you and I were chatting about using benchmarks, and I think having those steps along the way is a good strategy. And so is using the graphic organizer. It's good teaching because you're addressing another way to learn. And not every student, no matter what their situation or condition is, learns the same way. I know I don't learn the exact same way as you do, and neither one of us, I would think, would learn the same way as maybe any other randomly chosen individual. We all have our different strengths and weaknesses. And so
Absolutely.
putting that extra little bit into someone's toolbox is so important. Did you find when you were doing a writing assignment that not only did the graphic organizers help you, but if somebody had those benchmarks, those steps along the way, do so much by this date to break down the assignment into more manageable pieces, that was helpful for you?
Absolutely. That would it because for me, the way that I think, I like to follow a step-by-step process. That's just how I am because it's very more organized that way. So like to know like, okay, so I have to do this part and it's due by this time. So I'm like, got it. So I just could only focus on that part instead of being all over the place where I'm thinking, oh, I gotta think this part, this part, this part. I'm like, no. so I so it really does help a lot where they do it because it feels like the pace of it feels slower and at the level that I want it to be at. So it did meet that a lot where it matched my pace and I had the time to just focus on that part and still be able to finish on time with everybody else.
Now, you talked about free writing, and you said that what you do a lot now is you free write for your college assignments. Was that a difficult step to achieve, to be able to sit there and let the thoughts flow? As a writer, I can tell you that there are times when I need to free write, and there are other times when I really can't free write. I've got to have something structured. Do you find the same challenges?
In times, yes, there in the beginning when I first started for, for going online for my bachelor's degree program that I did struggle a little bit with the free writing, but I decided to do that because it also taught me with being flexible in terms of strategies, writing strategies and everything. And also free writing for me kind of saved me time too because I just write my thoughts out about from what I've learned from the notes that I got from my professors and everything. So, and nowadays, like for me, processing is a lot faster than it was as a kid.
Now, either in the past or in the present, are there things that maybe have slowed you down or slow you down to this day when you sit down and you try to function as a writer?
Uh, so that's a good question. Um, Nowadays, like it's about with the topic itself. That's where it's like, yes, it's gonna take me a little bit more time to be able to write it out. Uh, a lot, especially now that I'm into the my classes now or my specialty courses. So like one of them is a one of them I was very surprised that they had this in the class. It's an intro to autism class, but I understand why. It's for that way everybody like learns about what autism is
Sure.
about everything. And so for me with that class, I'm like it takes me not even like 2 hours to write something because of my experiences and everything, and just to be able to share with the from the notes as well that my professor shared with the class and everything. So really, it does depend on the topic, and I also believe that it also has to be interesting. If it's interesting to me, yes, I'm going to be able to bang it out like really quickly. But if it's like not, if it's something that I don't really know about, then it'll take me more time to write it.
I don't think you're much different than anybody else because I'm the same way.
From that.
If I really enjoy the topic, please get out of my way. Don't bother me. I'm writing now. But if I
Yeah.
don't understand it and I'm struggling a little bit, maybe I have to take a walk, have a conversation, do something that will get my mind off the task and clear it so I can come back and look a little more openly at it. So yeah, I think your advice is excellent advice.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this. You're an adult with autism, and can you describe a big challenge that maybe you still have to overcome to this day?
Just for me, it would have to still be with the amount of changes that are happening at once. So, like, yeah, I get it if there's a time where, yeah, like this one small change. But when there's so many changes happening at once for me, that's where I feel like a little overwhelmed personally. Like, I would actually give an example right now that I went through recently. So, there was these new opportunities that I got recently. One of them is going for certification and having other roles with this ABA company called Full Spectrum. So I'm very thankful that because a connection of mine, I have a connection that shared my blog website with this ABA company, and they wanted to recruit me. So uh, having all these things now happening at once, and it's like, wow, I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed in the beginning, but I've learned to manage and just balance everything. But yeah, I will admit, so many changes at once can be a lot, but it's just about with just breaking things down. So that's definitely a challenge that I still deal with, is with the amount of changes going on at once.
Now, you mentioned a couple of times that you write a blog. How did you get the motivation to say, okay, it's time for me to write a blog? Where did that come from?
So that actually came from when I was attending Brookdale, and I was in my last semester, and I was in my social media class that was online, and that kind of got the inspiration from my mom and my professor about with sharing my experiences online. And it wasn't just about with on my social media platforms. I my mom was telling me you should create a blog website and everything. And that's where my blog came to be. And it's been more than 2 years now that I've had it. I call it The World of Autism. You can look it up online and stuff. It is on Google, so it's very searchable now. So I what it is with the world of autism, it's about with experiences on the spectrum. It's not just mine, because even though I do share my own experiences too, I share from the community, whether it be educators, families, self advocates, anything like that. That's where it kind of like blew up into something much more than just my own experiences and everything.
Now, you mentioned Brookdale, and I have to say that that's where I had met you the first time. There's a group that comes out of Brookdale Community College in New Jersey, and we're the New Jersey Autism Think Tank. And for our listeners, I have to say that when I met you the first time, you impressed me as someone who is very conscientious, who's serious about what she does. And that impressed me that you would be taking time out of a busy college schedule to take a couple of hours on a Wednesday evening or Thursday evening, whenever we would meet. And you would be there to contribute your own experiences, your own wisdom, your own takes on what we were all exploring. And having you there made such a difference, because what we were speaking about in theory, you've lived, and it was reality for you. So the fact that you would give up that amount of time is just tremendous. I think that there's nothing but praise for you from any member that sits on the New Jersey Autism Think Tank at Brookdale. And I know that when your name comes up in conversations, that a smile comes across people's face, because they'll always be impressed with the fact that you don't have anything other than an inviting aspect to your personality. You're willing to listen to folks and you're willing to hear what they have to say. The fact that you're writing a blog and it's not just, I'm Michelle and here's what's happening to me, but it's, here's what's happening to me and other people who are dealing with similar situations, says a whole lot. And I tip my hat to you for that. That's excellent.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let's get a couple more questions here before we finish up. Now, I understand that you have been included in a book. Would you like to talk about that experience?
Yeah, so I actually have it right here just to show everybody. This is the book that I'm in. It's called This Is Autism. And it is not just not only I got to share my story, there's also other self-advocates that live with autism that are in this book as well. And they share their own journeys of growing up on the spectrum. And for me at the time, it was last year, and it pretty much branched out where I got to be in this book, all because of a series that I was on YouTube. It's called Ask an Autistic. I was on that for a good while and stuff, and I got to answer families' questions from my experiences on the spectrum. It would be from how to deal with eye contact to what kind of education system should an autistic be part of, like private or public, so all these like questions that just rise up from the community and stuff, we would share from our own experiences and everything. And then the host of that series wanted to gather people to have this book created, and that's where my story was shared in. And it came out published last year in August. It's almost been a year already since that happened, and a lot has changed since then.
Tell us about the changes.
So I mentioned in the book that I was as a paraprofessional in New Jersey. Now I live in Florida. My family and I moved from New Jersey to Florida after I've grown up in New Jersey for almost 20 years. We finally decided that we wanted to make the change, and we moved to Florida and everything. And just a whole new experiences and everything. And also, even before we even made the move, I decided to go back to school. And I've been pursuing my bachelor's degree since November, and pursuing in applied behavior analysis because I received that as a little girl. And I just want people to know that that through my experiences and through my college, that the combined experiences will really like help a lot into my future career.
Now, when this story of yours came out in the book, This Is Autism, was that story written by you, or was it told to others who then wrote your story?
So I actually contributed the story myself. I got to write. So I did personally write my own journey in the book, which is awesome because, it gives people like an insight from my perspectives and everything growing up.
What was the biggest challenge in writing your story?
The biggest challenge, I would say, when it came to organization of how I was putting everything together, because and also with like my word choice and everything, because growing up with writing skills, I always struggled with like when it came to word choice and the sentences and everything. But just with the process of putting it all together, like I get this part and I'll get this part, but this part I'm like, I having writer's block over here, so but yeah, and then eventually it did come together and stuff. I wrote that out last summer, like like spring, almost summertime and everything, and then came out.
So what was the most rewarding part of that whole process for you?
The most rewarding part was knowing that people are going to learn something about from me growing up as an autistic. That I feel like it's so much more valuable when you learn from someone who lives with it versus from like, just like from research. I think that's more valuable than anything else.
I'm sure that you are excellent as a paraprofessional because you seem to have your finger on the pulse of what's important to people, not just in classrooms, but in general, why the reality is a lot more vivid and a lot more immediate than the theory of something. The theory of something is wonderful and it's necessary, it's foundational, but when you learn something that's practical or from someone who is in the field doing something practical, that's important. So again, I tip my hat to you. That's a wonderful bit of wisdom.
Thank you.
Okay, let's begin to wrap it up with this question. What writing advice can you give to those who have autism and are either in the classroom or are out of the classroom and would like to write?
So my advice is to take those special interests that you have, whatever be from like, let's say with music, um, let's say from your stories that you like to read, just anything that inspires you, just write it because that's really going to drive you so much and with just building on your skills. So that would be my advice with writing.
That's great advice for everyone. Write for a passion, write for something that you can connect with. That's that's very good advice. Now, let me ask you to also talk to the writing teachers of the world. Is there something that you would like them to continue to do or maybe consider doing for their students?
So my advice for writing teachers would be to keep continuing those benchmarks where you break down to steps because that way that students don't feel so overwhelmed when it comes to the entire writing process. By breaking things down, it makes the task so much easier and to be able to organize the thoughts and just focus on that one area rather than like and it talks and you like focus on the little details which sometimes people think of the whole picture but it's also about the little things too, not just the whole picture.
And that advice goes for all teachers of writing. I have to say, as a teacher of writing, I'm sitting here nodding right along with you and agreeing that, yeah, that's excellent advice. Well, that concludes today's episode of An Author's Journey. And Michelle Vinokurov, I want to thank you for sharing with us some of your valuable time today. But before we go, how can we get a copy of your book, This is Autism?
So people can get a copy of the book This is Autism on Amazon. You just type in the book name and it comes right up.
And I know your picture's on the front too, with a bunch of other photos of the folks whose stories are being told as well.
Yeah, my picture is right on the corner over here.
It is bottom right. Now, Michelle, it's been an absolute pleasure taking an author's journey with you today. And I want to thank you for your generous use of your time with us.
Thank you so much for having me on. And it was such a pleasure to be on here. I'm glad I got to share my experiences and everything.
I think we're all better for this conversation. And you've been informative as well as entertaining. So thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, for An Author's Journey, I'm your host, Joe Pizzo. Have a wonderful day.